Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar titled Digital Transformation and the Future of Work. This webinar is an exciting collaboration hosted by Refinitiv with our partners Microsoft and Module Q. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. So if you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit your questions in the live Q&A chat below. We will try to answer these during the webinar, but if a fuller answer is required or we run out of time, we'll follow up via email as well. Also, an on-demand version of this webcast will be available, which will be sent to you afterwards. Great, so let's start by introducing our panelists. From Refinitiv, we're joined by Sneha Shah, Managing Director for the Refinitiv Business Accelerator, and Damien Sasso, our Head of Collaboration. From Microsoft, it is my pleasure to introduce Janet Jones, Head of Industry Strategy, and last but not least, David Brunner, CEO and founder of Module Q. Fantastic to see you all today. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. So front of mind, and certainly for our audience, we've seen a huge surge of new technologies. This really propelled companies to prioritize digital efforts, I'd say, and it's really accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic this year. It shifted companies to a more adaptable strategy and also for organizations to be more responsive to their customers and markets. So much has happened in 2020. And with that, I'd like to turn to Sneha, if that's okay with you. Good morning over there in New York.
Hi, John.
Hi. So as the global pandemic accelerated the need to adapt to new ways of thinking and working together, what are your thoughts around the value of information, but also supporting productivity in this environment? Would love to hear from you.
Well, it's really interesting. We've been leaning in and just listening to, our customers, our users in this time. And I think there's two different perspectives. So one is the corporate perspective, which is we're hearing from every customer that we work with, whether it's corporations or banks or sort of regulators, that they've had to accelerate their digital transformation. And the interesting thing about that is it's coming at net zero budget. So if they want to sort of actually accelerate and they want to invest, they have to take cost out. And they've got a lot of legacy systems. So a lot of them, are talking about, well, it would be lovely if I could start from zero, but I'm not. And so they have a lot to juggle. And what that means is it's actually creating more noise because people are sort of saying, well, we'd like to try out new tools. And so now you're giving the end user in those organizations a lot more to work with, which is really, really confusing for those end users. And the other thing we're finding is that there is increased productivity, but the problem is it's coming at a cost, and it's a human cost. And so it's not really sustainable. What we're finding is that corporations are sort of, getting the increased productivity, but less creativity and less innovation because people are getting burnt out. And so I think most companies are looking at this and saying, actually, we need to look at employee wellness and happiness as a key to long-term competitiveness because we need to be able to sustain the productivity and drive innovation. On a personal perspective, we're seeing users say there's so much more noise in our daily lives. Just, on top of the extra tools that we now have to use, there's also all the stuff that we're trying to juggle at home. And they're really asking for two things. They're asking for, give me the data that I need to make decisions where I already am. Don't make me go to like 10 different places to find it. And secondly, give me signal and noise. Don't just give me the raw data. Give me something that tells me what to do with it. And so as a company, when we look at all that, we're sort of really excited to look at different partners to see how do we find solutions to that. And so Microsoft, is one of our large tech partners, and we're very excited by the fact that, when you talk about coming to where people are, everyone's getting on Teams. 80% of our customers are saying they're either on Teams or moving to Teams within a year. Microsoft's Teams user base has grown from 16 million late last year to 115 million now and growing. And so they've really got that platform where people already are. And then Module Q, which is a startup that we've invested in and partnered with, is doing some incredible work around signal and noise and being able to bring disparate sources of information, legacy systems together in a really seamless way using AI right into the Teams environment where people are. And, with our data, which we know is critical to make so many business decisions in financial services, we think there's some really interesting things going on where you can start to bring those partnerships together to work for people's happiness.
Neha. And I really like the innovation and creativity in trying to help with support that. And also it's really important now in this particular environment, the wellness and happiness of sort of employees and firms. But I'm hearing that bring the data to where I am now. and the signal in noise, really, really fascinating. And one thing that blows me away is the Microsoft Teams community has really exploded. So from 16 million user base to 115 million in a matter of months, unbelievable. So I'm sure our audience would like to understand what this could also mean for them as well. I'd love to turn to Janet, and perhaps I could ask you, Microsoft Teams, how is that different to other communication or collaboration tools in the market today? And it'd be great if you could share some of your expertise and experiences through the evolution of Teams, especially with this explosion.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon all. Really pleased to be here joining Refinitiv and Module Q to talk about the future of work. I mean, financial services in particular is a focus industry for us globally, and partners and partnerships are absolutely key in terms of our industry approach and looking at the context of what those industry specific capabilities partners can bring alongside the underlying applications technologies. Coming to the Teams evolution. So, I mean, at its core, Teams is a collaborative workspace within Microsoft Office 365, and it acts as a hub for workplace conversations, collaborative teamwork, video chats, and document sharing, all designed to aid worker productivity in a secure environment. As you've said, we've seen the usage rocket up to 115 million users in October. So unsurprisingly, especially post-COVID, it's one of our fastest growing applications. And it's emerged as a star in its own right. So it's rather than being seen as an add-on for video calling, bundled within a larger productivity suite. Teams can serve as an alternative to, or even replace email communications entirely, and are acting more broadly to connect workers with the applications they need, specifically in a remote context. I think we think of it as a digital translation of an open office space. So I guess, from my perspective, why is it so different? It really is a collaboration place for all. It's so easy to build your teams and channels, whether it's within your company or outside of your company. It removes geographic and sort of time zone boundaries. And in particular, I guess a simple example is this centralized co-authoring of documents specific to projects in one place, with the ability to chat and have notes and actions all aligned in one place. So I think it's evolving really to be a true workflow application. I was talking to a colleague the other day, and they said to me, actually, I think it is like a single pane of glass into your role, your job and your organisation. And we're actually seeing now that most people are in Teams for the bulk of the day, and they just dip out for emails and other work, reiterating the point that it's not just a bolt-on tool for video calling. Thinking about the industries that we focus on from an enterprise perspective, so public sector, healthcare, retail, financial services, clearly there's scope for more capability to be added to support these industry specific workflows. And that's exactly what we're looking at today with the Module Q integration. So thinking about what we've seen in financial services, I've got a couple of examples for you. And we saw huge adoption, and actually an unprecedented pace of adoption, seeing some really large established firms getting to 90 or 100% of adoption within 3 or 4 months. And this enforced change has sort of given a new permission for the pace of transformation and innovation. So a couple of examples. We saw an app created by an insurer in the Lloyd's of London market, used by brokers as an online booking system to arrange virtual appointments and share documentation securely. This has seen, huge established cultural barriers broken down, and seen people doing something very differently for the first time in centuries. And I think that's an observation I'd make, that COVID's given permission to people to do things differently. And more we see these being user driven, not IT driven. And we're really putting the tools in the hands of users to evolve their business practices. So just touching on another cultural aspect, we've seen a lot of financial services institutions using Teams for their town halls, and not only leadership being seen in their home environments, but getting more people showing up and more people feeling actually included from a cultural perspective, due to the town halls being broadcast through Teams, and it breaking down the hierarchies that are very prevalent within financial services in particular. So I think just expanding on that cultural point and the evolution of more remote work, and you touched on this, but we have to be really cognizant that we have a duty of care around fatigue and Teams burnout and the stress that being constantly plugged in can provide. And a lot of that will be outside of the technology and what we choose, how we choose to evolve how we work. But actually, when we're using the technology, things that we're building in to think about how people structure their days or how they feel when they're using Teams as a channel. We've built in a virtual commute. We built in together mode so that you can actually see yourselves represented differently when you're interacting on a video call. And we're going to introduce a coffee bar. So if you do have those coffee chats, you can do them virtually and feel like you're in a different setting than just seeing the sort of square faces that we're all accustomed to now. So just one last point before I finish, and I think it's important to touch on, is around accessibility. Technology can unlock solutions that empower people with disabilities and lead to greater innovations for everyone. Accessibility is a priority for us, and we aim to build it into what we design for every team, organisation and user, and Teams is no exception there. And it's already including tools for accessibility like screen reader, live captions and translation. And it's compatible with assistive technologies like dictation software, eye control, etc. And I was just advised this week there's an app that's been added in, an accessibility bot that helps you understand how the tools can be more accessible and fit your specific needs. So bit of a whistle-stop tour through how Teams has evolved and a snapshot in terms of what its potential is to continue supporting innovation and collaboration globally. So I'll hand back to you, John.
Thank you, Janet, and hopefully we can join one of those coffee bars in the future. That'd be fantastic.
You're very welcome.
I love that insight, and it really hit me when you said the breaking the cultural barriers and permission to do things differently. That really resonates, and it really aligns to what Sneha was saying about what we're seeing in the trends in the market today. And I really love empowering the people, I should say, and giving the tools to the people. So thank you very much for sharing those insights and this Teams journey. I think it's a once in a lifetime experience we'll have in this digital transformation, particularly accelerated by the current environment we reside in. I've just to pause for a moment, I've just seen a question come up through the chat. So I'll read this out and perhaps I'll pose it to the panel. I think Sneha, you touched on this earlier when we started. So the question goes, there are a lot of challenges around budget and investing in digital transformation. What is the best way for companies to approach funding? So perhaps I'll start with Sneha, and just a reminder to the audience, feel free to submit questions to the live chat below. So over to you, Sneha.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, everyone's sort of coming back and telling us that they don't really have, I mean, no one had really planned for this transformation to happen at this scale and pace. So they don't really have the budget available. And so they're having to find ways to remove cost. And one of the things we've seen is they're using partners that already sort of exist in their environment. So we're seeing a lot of companies coming to us and say, hey, Microsoft, for example, is already a key partner of ours. So is Refinitiv. What are you guys doing to work together to actually help us take out cost? And so I think if you're on that sort of in that role in a company where you're sort of worried about the budget, I would go to some of your partners and ask them what they can do to work together, because actually you could get a lot of efficiency out of that.
Thank you, Sneha. And I just wanted to reflect a bit more on sort of what Janet was saying around customers now would be inundated with all this information, all this ability, these new tools, in terms of the direction and digital strategy when leading an organization. So I can see really effective collaboration helping overcome some of these challenges for innovation and drive innovation. So I just want to turn to Damien, if that's okay, and listening to what both Sneha shared around productivity and Janet's insights around collaboration and the ability to innovate. Could you perhaps share some insight as to Refinitiv's thinking in terms of digital collaboration and what the partnership with Microsoft could mean in the market?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think, obviously at Refinitiv, we're certainly excited to announce this partnership and work more closely with Microsoft on Teams. We all see, as Janet alluded to and Sneha, the power behind Microsoft Teams and what it can do to really connect organizations and allow for this, accelerated digital transformation. But I think one of the things that really is exciting about Teams is certainly the capability that Microsoft has built in and continues to develop around APIs, integrations, and ways to really bring workflow to a forefront in Microsoft Teams. So, you know, if just to walk through kind of the way that we're thinking, you know, in slide form, you know, Refinitiv is really looking at how we can bring some of the exciting things that we do at Refinitiv, both from a data and financial desktop standpoint, to really work in conjunction with the tools that Microsoft has in Office 365 and Microsoft Teams. We've gone through, obviously, in this industry, a pretty accelerated digital transformation due to the COVID-19 crisis. And really, what we're thinking at Refinitiv and my team is working on now is really designing and starting to iterate on internal workflows that can really be powerful with Teams and Office through document collaboration. Janet touched on this a little bit, you know, just a little before, where you know, the Teams does a great job of linking the tools that Microsoft provides through Excel, PowerPoint, Word, and everything in Office 365. So what Refinitiv is doing through our own development is starting to look for ways to integrate the data and workflow we have behind our next generation desktop and Refinitiv Workspace to tie into those through the Office, you know, Office integrations, as well as Teams integrations using Microsoft Graph API, using you know, Power BI applications. So if you take a look at the thing we have here on the left-hand side, our first focal point is really supercharging workflow around those types of use cases, and things like capital markets workflows around pitch book building, research, authoring and distribution, things that really bring those use cases in financial services where users are working internally at their firm to collaborate around content and you know, and data distribution and workflow. Now, as we've watched the community in financial services start to roll out Teams more and more, you know, we've certainly seen it become prevalent, not just in, you know, sell sides, but buy sides in the larger community within FSI. That's when we start to get into the power of potential front office workflows. So our team is working on thinking where Microsoft Teams can start to really have an impact in that space. So you look at the example here is once you have that community really using Teams, you can start to look at ways to build integrations through Microsoft, through the Teams API, like bots, tab applications, message extensions, and the things that Microsoft has really provided as a canvas to build, to start taking workflows like RFQ and IOI, price discovery between firms. And where Refinitiv really comes in is through our next generation desktop Refinitiv Workspace, putting that as a solution that operates alongside Teams. So in the use case you see here, where traders and brokers can communicate through Teams bots, you also have something like Refinitiv Workspace and a blotter that can run alongside Teams to really put an end-to-end workflow behind trading and price discovery. So those are the kinds of things that that my team at Refinitiv is working on with the Teams API, with the data and workflow that we have in our next generation desktop of Refinitiv Workspace to really try to supercharge this partnership to solve some of the really you know, meaty use cases that you find in financial services for collaboration.
Thanks, Damien. Really, really fascinating. And actually, there's a question that's come up that's saying, perhaps I'll start with Damien, and I'd love to open this up to Janet and Sneha as well. How can Refinitiv and Module Q and Microsoft all come together, help buy-side and sell-side firms working smarter, faster, and simplify operational processes? So, Damien, you touched on the buy-side and the sell-side community. Perhaps I'll start with you, and perhaps Sneha and Janet, if you'd love to chip in, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I just love to elaborate on that. I mean, the thing is, two things. You know, once everyone in a community has kind of embraced Teams, and we've started to see that potential, just because, you know, buy side and sell side users are frequent users of the tools in Microsoft Office. And Teams, like we said, really integrates there, is rolled out as part of it. Once you see that community there's the power to really bring you know, bring firms together through integrations, like we talked about, bots, applications that really can be used to connect two sides, you know, of a trade, for example, or a counterparty workflow. And then once you have that community on Teams, certainly there's the potential through the power that Microsoft has with their development there to really figure out new and innovative ways to really open up and link those counterparties. So we certainly, with the development that Microsoft has made on Teams just in the last 6 months, fully expect that there's going to be a lot of potential to really find ways to link those two counterparties, and certainly turn it over, John, to some of the other folks on our panel.
Amazing. Thank you for the insight, Damien. And Sneha, I think perhaps you could add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, in one of our design sessions in the last few weeks, someone said, come for the content, stay for the community. And I think that's really the potential of this, right? Like you come in because you need certain content to actually do your job, whether you're sort of a trader or an asset manager. And then, you actually stay because the community is bringing you value, because you can learn and share and grow with each other. And I think that's really the potential of these three coming together.
Thank you. Janet, is there anything you wanted to add sort of on the communities as well?
So, I mean, look, I'd echo all of the points already made, and I was sort of just jotting down power of community. I think one of the things I'm thinking about is actually driving sort of industry-wide standards, bearing in mind it's a regulated industry, and giving people the confidence that they can collaborate in what is, as I said, a regulated industry, giving them confidence that they can collaborate safely and not sort of going outside of the regulations that they need to work to on a day-to-day basis, through sort of bringing the power of that innovation together.
Thank you, and that's really insightful. So I see this huge growth opportunity for innovation and the emerging technologies to play an even bigger role today. So I've been speaking with David Brunner, and I'm understanding the immense power of AI, data, and the insights together, which could really shape the future of our work. So David, a very early good morning to you over there in the West Coast. I'm sure the audience would love to know more about the Module Q journey, and also what is your vision for the future of platforms?
John, thank you very much. And I guess good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us here. We've heard some great perspectives about Microsoft Teams as a platform. Damien talked about how it can support a range of integrations. JJ talked about some apps being built on it. And I'd like to add an AI perspective to the Teams platform story. And also, I think it connects to the question about how Refinitiv, Module Q, and Microsoft can come together to help people work smarter, because that's really the core of AI. I've spent my last 20 years or so of my career focused on AI, first at Stanford, then at Harvard as a PhD student. And one of the things that I think is so exciting to me about the evolution of the field of AI over that time is that there's become a growing recognition among business leaders and executive leadership that AI is actually not about taking all our jobs and automating everything and removing people from the equation. The power of AI really gets unlocked when we have AI working alongside people, doing the things the AI is good at, and helping people do the things that they're good at even better. We saw that Accenture came out with their technology vision report for 2020 earlier this year. 79% of executive leaders, this shocked me, 79% of executive leaders said that human AI collaboration will be crucial to the future of innovation in their organizations. I think that gets back to this point about how do you innovate that Sneha was talking about. How do you innovate in a world where there's too much information, there's too many distractions? Part of the answer is to bring AI in, but then you run into the next challenge, which is how do you bring AI in? Because up until very recently, there really hasn't been a way for AI to participate in the workflow, to be there alongside people. And that's really the transformative power of Microsoft Teams, is that the APIs and the extensibility that Teams provides, it's extensibility not just for other people, it's extensibility for AI as well. And so AI can begin to join in the conversation and to add to the conversation. And maybe if I could get the first slide. So the slide here, as soon as it's visible, is a screenshot of Microsoft Teams, for those of you who haven't worked in it yet. And it shows Module Q AI within Teams delivering, and this was an update I received from our AI the other day about an appointment of a key role at Microsoft, which of course we work closely with, so it was timely and relevant for me. An alert being surfaced to me within Teams. And the way that it came to me was with Module Q kind of tapping me on the shoulder virtually as if it were an AI colleague and saying, hey, here's something relevant to what you're working on that you may be interested in. And we're able to do that because our AI is actually looking not just at Teams, but at your whole workspace, at your email, your calendar, CRM data, maybe portfolio management systems to understand your investment positions, to understand what it is you're focused on, and then to surface timely and relevant insights. And the more you use it, the more accurate these insights become. And so it actually becomes a lever to overcome the kind of information overload that Sneha was talking about earlier and help you focus in on what matters. And if I could get the next slide, what's transformative about having this kind of AI in the background is that it's actually giving each professional a massive AI brain in the cloud working 24/7 behind the scenes to make them smarter, which means that when you're up against anyone that doesn't have AI working for them, you have a competitive advantage and information edge because you're more aware. You're getting daily updates from the Module Q AI showing you what's going on relevant to your clients and industries that you cover. If you're a banker, you're going to be one of the first to know about PNC shaking up the banking industry in the US. When you're going into a meeting, we give you briefings ahead of your meetings so you can go in with better insights. And those can be insights from what's going on in the markets, but it also can hook up to SharePoint or your other internal document repositories and surface up internal corporate content like research and case studies so that you're going in with a more compelling story. And then finally, Sneha mentioned you come for the content, you stay for the collaboration. It's really about getting everybody on the same page, and that's much more difficult in a remote working environment. So we surface up alerts on what is trending and what is proving most useful out of all these insights to your colleagues and collaborators so that you can keep people connected and keep information flowing even when you can't all gather around the physical espresso machine. And we're going to have to figure out, JJ, how we can integrate into the coffee bar experience as well so that these insights can come up and spark conversations as you have your virtual coffee. And I trust that Microsoft will also tackle the problem of how to deliver coffee via Teams. But if I could get the last slide here. The other point I want to make is on the topic of security and privacy, because AI, I think we've all come to understand that AI is only as powerful as the data that it taps into. And so what's crucial about our approach is we're not sucking out the data and taking it to places unknown to do something with it. We're keeping the data right where it already lives inside your secure compliance perimeter, and we're bringing the data to the AI. So that means that the AI can make your people smarter without compromising security or compliance. So just to sum up, I think that the power of Teams is that finally, after 50 or so years of work to develop AI technologies, AI can actually get in the game alongside humans and be a collaborator to enhance their creativity and their thinking.
That's really insightful. Thank you, David. The better insights, and it's astounding, 79% of human AI collaboration. And so how do you bring the AI in? It's really interesting to listen to that. Actually, there's a lot of questions coming through, and it's amazing to see the audience participation. And perhaps I'll open this up to the panel, but a question I really like, and I'd love to start with David on this one. For an organization that is about to begin digital transformation, what would be the first key steps to take for a successful uptake?
And it's a great question, John, because what we often see with Microsoft Teams, and I don't think it's not Teams's fault, it's just the reality of collaboration tools, is what I call the empty conference room phenomenon, which is that what you usually do, the first thing you do after you walk into an empty conference room and realize there's nobody else there is you walk out of it. If there's no conversations, if there's nobody else coming to you within the Teams environment, you have no reason to be there. And so it's actually a huge challenge to drive the behavioral change to get people talking and collaborating within Teams. And once you get used to it, it's like, wow, how did we ever live without this? But until you get there, there's this sort of tipping point you have to get past. And that's actually been one of the things that we've focused on with the Module Q experience, is to make the AI instantly valuable in terms of driving client relevant, market relevant, customer relevant insights into the Teams experience and into conversations and discussions within Teams, so that every time you go to Teams, every morning, there's new client relevant insights within Teams to draw you in. And then one of the first things you do when you find something that's game changing about a personnel, an executive change, or a change in an M&A or a market development, is you're going to want to share that with your collaborators. And the easiest place to do that is within Teams, and so it snowballs, and you get a virtuous cycle as content draws people in. And so I go back to Sneha's quote there, come for the content, stay for the collaboration. I think that's a way that you can draw people into the Teams experience and ensure that the digital transformation snowballs and sort of takes off exponentially rather than fizzling out.
Amazing. And perhaps to the panel, Damien, Sneha, Janet, anything to add to that? That was really, thank you, David.
So, I mean, I guess I'd sort of take a step back and think it's a big question in financial services in terms of how do we achieve successful digital transformation. And for me, I guess the point I'd make is hugely around culture and thinking about how you are evolving the culture of your organization. Microsoft's, famously been on and continues to go on a cultural transformation around focusing on a growth mindset. And I think one of the things, and having worked in financial services, one of the big things for me is actually thinking about how you communicate. What is the benefit to the person that is going to be using this new tool, this new capability? Because it means different things to everybody. When I joined Microsoft, I don't mind admitting, it took me quite a while to get my head around Teams. I'd sort of embraced OneNote and everything else, but like you were saying, David, it didn't click, and it actually took for me to realize, why is this so much of a benefit? Why is it good for me day to day? Now I live in it, obviously. But yeah, those would be the points I'd make.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think with anything, and I really like Jana's point, you have to start with the why, and the why is very human-centered, right? Why are we making these digital transformations? It's not just so the organization can save money, it's so the organization can be agile and that can attract the best talent and have the most impact in the markets that the organization serves. And so I think if you start with the why in mind, you actually do build a very human-centered digital strategy. And the things that we've seen in customers that are doing this successfully, first is, the business and technology groups have to partner on this. And I think it's really important. It can't be just business-led or just technology-led. You really have to have a good sort of sense of what the why is in between those two groups. The second is to prioritize the people that are, in customer-facing groups first. So when you're thinking about rolling out new tools and technologies, most people start with the back office teams because they feel like, well, it'll be a low-risk way to try it. But actually, if you don't try these tools and technologies with the people that are spending the most time with your customers, you're not going to be able to see kind of if it's going to have an impact or not. And then I think the third thing I would say is, as you think about digital transformation, you need both scale and agility. And so the scale comes from partnering with big companies that are in this space already, whether it's Microsoft or another company. And the agility comes from, partnering with startups in this space as well. And so lean into both ecosystems. I think sort of we found that, those three tips really help to make for a successful digital transformation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add, and I'll just cap it off since this was such an impactful question. I was going to say one of the things that really, when you start to think about digital transformation and why the question will always come up, like new tool, why should we use this new tool? I think the real element that's powerful behind Teams, David's work on Module Q has shown this. in many ways, we're only at the starting point of kind of the level of workflow capability that's going to come from a tool like Microsoft Teams, and it really is an operating system for work and an operating system for people to engage and live. It's like the power that we got behind Windows maybe 20, 30 years ago is the power we're going to have behind Microsoft Teams. And so the thing is, when you start to think about digital transformation in your organization, is really unlocking the creativity from the people that are going to be using that tool on a regular basis to rethink about the way they do work, the way they communicate with each other, and how that all ties together. Because there's often, and I've seen this in my career in collaboration, oftentimes the individuals that spend as much time with that tool don't realize all the tools that might be at their disposal, as well as the developers that they work with in their firm, to really make their lives so much easier and better. And I think that's the thing that that if you can engage with the folks that are going to be using that tool on a regular basis, you can really find new and unique ways to both engage with it and make it so that 6 to 12 months from now, they couldn't imagine living without it, as opposed to it being something new, before that period of time. So it's really that kind of way of thinking.
And I'd love, John, I would love to just take 30 seconds just to underscore what you said, Damien, because I think it's a little bit hard, I think, at first to recognize what a profound statement that is, that this is actually a platform, an operating system for work and collaboration. And when you start really getting into the kinds of APIs that Microsoft has put onto workflow with Teams, and most recently, Jeff Teeper just was highlighting some of the new APIs that have even made meeting experiences extensible with APIs. There's hardly any collaborative business workflow that can't be reinvented within Teams by using those APIs to bring in more information, to bring in more capabilities. So just want to emphasize, I think, that the power of Teams as a platform is really profound.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. And I think we've got time maybe for 2 questions if we move swiftly. I'd love to perhaps start with Janet on this question and open up to the panelists. One of the biggest emerging concerns in this current way of working is employee resilience. So we've talked about productivity and happiness. Within the current way of working, what can we expect in the future to strengthen this? So a bit more emphasis around the wellness and productivity. I'd love to hear more from the panelists, and starting perhaps with Janet or Sneha, if I may.
Yeah, sure. So interesting. Been having a discussion on this just this morning in our leadership team around, how to give people permission to take time back. And, part of the answer, I think, will be from technology, but a huge part is actually how we as humans evolve out of this sort of very, very remote way of working into a more hybrid model, and how technology evolves to enable that hybrid way of working to suit as we flex out of COVID. But I think as well, technology can play a part in terms of helping us understand how people are feeling, helping us understand how much people are working. I know in Microsoft, we've observed that people are working at a minimum 25% more in terms of the sort of the amount of time that they're plugged into technology. So we do need to do something to understand how we can get people to look at structuring their day differently. I know from a sort of application perspective, we're looking at what wellbeing tools we can bring into Teams as an application in particular. So I think it's been announced we've got a collaboration with Headspace to look at how people can incorporate meditation into their daily work. So I think it'll be a mixture of what's the human actions we take to evolve how we're working and how much we're plugged in. What can technology tell us to understand how people are feeling, and what tools can be added to support people in making different choices as they go through their day-to-day work.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jenna. And I think it is a matter of organizations using technology, but also processes and policies to try and change that environment for people. So, for example, at Refinitiv, we've started a me hour every day. So every day there's 1 hour blocked in people's calendars in their time zone that no one's allowed to sort of book meetings for them, which I think is, it's a start. It's not enough, but it's a good start. And we have a we day every month, because I think we've realized that resilience comes from both your personal capability and your personal space for resilience, but also your community and the people around you. And so, this monthly We Day allows us to get together as communities. And so we had the last one was around Kindness Day, and we had a whole bunch of employee-led initiatives that people could dial into to learn more about sort of kindness and how to be kind to ourselves. And so I think it's sort of creating those spaces, but also realizing that actually a lot of this is, to your point, Janet, around giving employees permission to take the time back. One of the things I say to my team is, use the 2-foot rule for meetings. And I used to say this even before the pandemic, but it's even more important now, which is, you have 2 feet and you should use them to vote on whether or not you need to be in a meeting. So you need to take responsibility for am I really needed at all these places, and how do I carve myself out the time? And then the companies need to provide you the tools and the space to be able to do that. But it's definitely, it's a pressing concern. I don't think we've got, fantastic answers yet, but I think we're all on the journey to learn better.
Thank you, Janet and Sneha. And I will come to David and Damien. We'll never leave you out. There's so much audience interaction. Thank you so much for your questions. And we do promise we'll get these answered to you by email. We're just coming towards time, and I'd love to end with this question because for me, it's very pertinent and really topical. So with the recent news of new vaccines coming into play, are you able to reflect on what this could mean? And I suppose it's around collaboration and platforms. So I'd love to start with Damien and then perhaps with David and to Sneha and Janet as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's that's fantastic news. It's something for everyone in the world to be excited about, because it gives this hope of somewhat of a return to normalcy. I think the question is that everyone asks themselves around work, and certainly something when we've been using these tools like Microsoft Teams is, what does normalcy look like going forward after this, right? I think Microsoft Teams is. And I think, first off, normalcy is going to end up looking very much like some combination of working from home and office and less travel. I think Bill Gates made a point actually yesterday, saying that that's something like office, work travel will be reduced, I think, by almost 50%. You're going to see work from home at a level of around 30%. I think those are the numbers he threw out there. And I think the thing that's so impactful about Microsoft Teams is really, as a platform, is that it's really strived to get to parity between the desktop and mobile experience. And I think mobile is going to play such a big role in the future. We probably spent, in the industry using tools like Microsoft Teams more and more time at our desktops, in our homes, in remote locations. But as you start to transition to a somewhat of a return to normalcy, commuting, work from home days, and a balance, that real parity where the experience is the same on desktop and mobile for both the core platform and Teams, and then the integrations from firms like Refinitiv bringing in workflow integrations, having that experience be so similar between desktop and mobile is going to be really, really important, I think, moving forward, especially in a return to some version of normalcy.
Thanks, Damien. I'd love to hear from David on this one as well. What's the new norm? And just conscious we've got 2 minutes left, so perhaps we wrap up after this. But let's see if we can get David in it and perhaps one other.
Yeah, so I'll be very brief. I think the question is whether we go back to normal or whether we go forward to a new normal, and I think that will differentiate between the organizations that embrace the new possibilities that have been unlocked as the pandemic has given us permission. I think was JJ your term, to do things differently. The organizations that have figured out better ways, and the one area that I would highlight is inclusion and the ability to really have a global talent pool that can participate on equal footing through these virtual collaboration platforms. And I think anyone who has experienced the power of inclusion globally, even if it means sometimes you need to get up very early in the morning, is never want to go back from it.
Thank you, David. And I don't know if there's a bit of time for Janet. I'd love to hear a quick line from yourself and Sneha, and then we'll wrap up here, if that's okay.
I mean, to echo Damien's first comment, great news on the vaccine. I think we will see an evolution from where we are now, but certainly not a return to the old normal. I think for me, the point around mobile is really, really key. It's about being able to do as much as you can wherever you are. And the other thing I think is the augmentation point that we've talked about here. It's like how much more can be brought in to really help us make the best of the time wherever we are, to get the most out of our employees and make them feel and support their well-being as well through technology.
Thank you, Janet. And final words from Sneha.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of you. And I think this is an opportunity for us. We're sitting at a point where we can really reimagine what the future looks like. And one of the things I'm most excited by is a lot of the issues that we've been dealing with globally, whether it's sustainable finance, whether it's climate change, whether it's, human-centered working. Those are all front and center right now. And we have an opportunity to reimagine tools and sort of ability for us to address those in the future. So that's what I see as the new normal.
Thank you to our wonderful panelists. Fantastic note to end on. So just to come for the content and stay for the community. I'll end on that note. So thank you to the audience for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you. And a reminder that the on-demand version of the webcast will be available, and we'll send this to you hopefully by the end of the week. So wishing everybody a safe and good rest of the week, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.